At 80, Pattie Boyd is finally sharing the full truth about a life lived under the spotlight of celebrity. For years, she was the beautiful muse to two of rock's greatest legends, her face and essence immortalized in classic songs like Something and Layla. But beneath the surface of that romantic tale was a much darker reality than anyone knew. Now, in her own words, her story isn't one of inspiration, but of betrayal, pain, and humiliation. Pattie Boyd's journey began a world away from the rock stages of London. Born Patricia Ann Boyd in Somerset, England on March 17, 1944, she was the oldest of four children in a family defined by constant upheaval. Her father's Royal Air Force career took the family to Nairobi, Kenya, before her parents' divorce in 1952 led her mother to remarry and bring the children back to England. By the early 1960s, a teenage Pattie was living in London, seeking her own path. Her first job was a decidedly unglamorous one, shampooing hair at Elizabeth Arden's salon. Her luck changed when a photographer's assistant spotted her raw potential. Soon she was appearing on the covers of Vogue, Elle, and Vanity Fair. With her wide, innocent eyes, long hair, and delicate features, she became one of the quintessential faces of the swinging 60s. Designers like Ossie Clark named collections after her, and her style, both bohemian and modern, set trends for a generation. Her career took a pivotal turn in 1964 when she was cast as a schoolgirl in the Beatles' film A Hard Day's Night. It was a small role, but it changed her life forever. On set, she met George Harrison, the Beatles' introspective lead guitarist. Their connection was instant. They married on January 21, 1966. Harrison cherished her, writing timeless songs like Something and For You Blue in her honor. Frank Sinatra famously declared Something the greatest love song of the past 50 years. But even in those early days, the harmony was cracking. Harrison's deep dive into Indian spirituality and his escalating infidelities made Boyd feel increasingly isolated and unvalued. She had given up her modeling career at his request to focus on their marriage, but she soon felt trapped in the role of a trophy wife at home. This profound loneliness would eventually lead her toward another man, George's close friend, Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton first met Pattie Boyd in the mid-1960s while moving within the same elite circles of London's rock and fashion scenes. Clapton had already established himself as one of the most gifted guitarists of his era, playing with the Yardbirds and John Mayall's Bluesbreakers, earning him the enduring nickname Slowhand. In 1966, he co-founded Cream, one of rock's first supergroups, and his blistering blues rock sound propelled him to global superstardom. But while his career was soaring, his personal life was consumed by a devastating fixation. Despite his close friendship with George Harrison, Clapton had fallen desperately in love with Boyd. His feelings were an open secret among their inner circle. Friends like Bobby Whitlock remember Clapton's constant torment, endlessly talking about her and her marriage to his closest friend. In 1969, his obsession spilled into a letter. Boyd received an anonymous note signed only with the initial E, filled with a desperate longing. For nothing more than the pleasures past, I would sacrifice my family, my God, and my own existence. If you want me, take me. I am yours. If you don't want me, please break the spell that binds me. Boyd later admitted she was deeply shaken. The intensity of his words left her confused and flattered, but she was still loyal to George. She showed her husband the letter. Clapton's agony only intensified, and his unrequited love finally became music, culminating in the 1970 masterpiece album Layla and other assorted love songs. Inspired by the 12th century Persian tale of Layla and Majnun, Clapton channeled his suffering into the title track, Layla, a raw, searing confession of passion and despair that was unmistakably a message to Boyd. It was both a cry for help and a public declaration of love. Boyd later confessed that the song broke her resolve. The realization that I had inspired such passion and creativity, the song got the better of me. I could resist no longer, she admitted. By the early 1970s, as her marriage to Harrison fractured under the weight of infidelity and spiritual distance, Boyd finally began to waver. Clapton's relentless devotion had become impossible to ignore. What began as a dangerous temptation would soon ignite one of rock history's most infamous love triangles. By the early 1970s, George Harrison's marriage to Pattie Boyd was falling apart. Their fairy tale union, born in the glow of Beatlemania, was now corroded by emotional distance, infidelity, and clashing priorities. Harrison's deep immersion in Eastern spirituality, which had once been a shared interest, evolved into a lifestyle that often excluded Boyd. He would spend weeks in India devoted to meditation and the Hare Krishna movement, while she was left to feel increasingly invisible. Boyd later admitted she was trapped in the role of the beautiful wife, while she desperately yearned for more meaning in her own life. Adding to her isolation were Harrison's many affairs. Boyd described him as a hot-blooded boy who reveled in the attention of women drawn to his fame. Flirtations that once seemed innocent escalated into blatant infidelity. The most devastating betrayal came when she discovered Harrison's affair with Maureen Starkey, the wife of Ringo Starr. Boyd recalled the deep humiliation of finding Maureen at Friar Park, the Harrison estate, lying casually on a mattress while George dismissed her presence with chilling indifference. That was the breaking point, she said, a wound she admitted would never fully heal. Meanwhile, Clapton's pursuit became increasingly overt. No longer content to suffer in silence, he confronted Harrison directly in 1970, stating bluntly, "I have to tell you, man, I'm in love with your wife." It was a surreal moment, one legendary guitarist confessing his love for another's wife to his face. Harrison, known for his quiet demeanor, responded with a mix of sarcasm and resignation, as if acknowledging a truth he could no longer deny. The tension between the two men often played out through their music. Actor John Hurt described witnessing what he called a guitar duel at Friar Park, a charged jam session where Harrison and Clapton expressed their anger and rivalry through their instruments. While Boyd later insisted the event was exaggerated, she admitted the emotions were real. They were boy men, she said. Any annoyance, anger, and irritation from George only really came out when he was playing guitar with Eric. By 1974, Boyd could no longer ignore the truth. Her marriage to Harrison had become an intolerable hollow shell, eroded by neglect and betrayal. She left him that year, closing the chapter on nearly a decade as the wife of a Beatle. But her newfound freedom didn't bring peace. Instead, it ushered in a new and equally complicated storm. Waiting in the wings was Clapton, whose passion had not wavered, but whose demons were about to consume them both. When Pattie Boyd finally separated from George Harrison in 1974, her relationship with Eric Clapton seemed inevitable. For years, he had relentlessly pursued her, pouring his obsession into his music, letters, and public declarations. In 1977, after her divorce from Harrison was finalized, Boyd and Clapton began openly dating. 2 years later, on March 27, 1979, they married in Tucson, Arizona. George Harrison even attended the wedding, famously joking that Clapton was his husband. To the outside world, this unusual arrangement symbolized a bond of friendship that had survived betrayal. And for a brief time, the marriage between Boyd and Clapton appeared to be a love story that had finally found its happy ending. But behind the smiles and public appearances, the reality was much darker. Clapton was in the midst of his battles with alcohol and drugs. Years of heroin addiction had left scars, and while he had overcome that, alcoholism soon took its place. His drinking binges and erratic behavior poisoned their relationship. Boyd later revealed that his unpredictable mood swings, fueled by substance abuse, forced her to live in a constant state of uncertainty. What should have been a stable, fulfilling marriage became another cage of emotional turmoil. There were other struggles that tested their union. Clapton desperately wanted to start a family, and Boyd desperately wanted to give him children. They turned to in vitro fertilization treatments, but each attempt ended in heartbreaking failure. Boyd described the process as humiliating and emotionally exhausting, the repeated failures leaving her devastated. While she was enduring the silent grief of infertility, Clapton betrayed her trust in the most painful way possible. In 1985, Boyd discovered that Clapton had fathered a daughter, Ruth, with recording studio manager Yvonne Kelly. The betrayal cut deeply, especially because Boyd was still enduring the crushing disappointment of failed IVF treatments at the time. Just a year later, Clapton fathered another child, Connor, with Italian actress Laurie Del Santo, while still married to Boyd. For Pattie, the discovery was like a dagger to the heart. She later admitted she felt mocked by fate, struggling desperately to have children with the man she loved while he was fathering them with other women in secret. By the mid-1980s, the marriage was collapsing under the weight of addiction, infidelity, and broken dreams. Boyd left Clapton in 1987, and their divorce was finalized in 1989. Looking back, she described the experience as devastating, admitting, "I had lost my sense of self. I was no longer Mrs. Pallow, Famous George, or Mrs. Famous Eric. Who was I? I was no one." When Pattie Boyd walked away from Eric Clapton in 1987, she was more than just a woman leaving a marriage. She was a person desperately trying to rediscover who she was after decades of being defined by others. For more than 20 years, she had lived in the shadows of two of the world's most celebrated musicians. First as the wife of a Beatle, then as the muse of a guitar god. She had been praised, idolized, and immortalized in song, yet she was rarely seen for herself. Now divorced from both men, she was determined to reclaim her own identity. Boyd turned to therapy to untangle the web of betrayal, neglect, and pain that had defined her relationships. She openly admitted that her sense of self-worth had been shattered. The constant comparisons, first to the endless stream of women in Harrison's life and later to Clapton's repeated infidelities, had left deep scars. But healing came slowly, and a vital part of that healing was through creativity. Photography, which had once been a private passion, became her salvation. Boyd began documenting the world around her with a keen eye shaped by her years at the heart of the rock and roll scene. Her photographs were intimate, authentic, and deeply personal, capturing moments not just of the famous figures she had known, but also her own journey of survival. Over time, her work gained recognition. Exhibitions in London and abroad showcased her ability to tell stories through images, and she began to emerge as an artist in her own right, no longer defined solely as a muse. Writing became another form of liberation. In 2007, Boyd released her memoir, Wonderful Tonight, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, and Me. The book became an international bestseller, praised for its honesty and raw emotion. For the first time, she told the world what it was really like to live with two of rock's biggest icons. The infidelities, the loneliness, the pain, and the rare moments of genuine connection. Her candid revelations shocked fans who had long idealized her marriages. But the memoir was more than an exposé. It was her way of finally reclaiming her voice after decades of silence. By the time she entered her 70s, Boyd had become comfortable living outside the shadow of rock mythology. In 2015, she married Rod Weston, a property developer she had known for years, in a quiet ceremony at Chelsea Old Town Hall. Unlike her earlier marriages, this one was not built on fame, obsession, or chaos. It was grounded in companionship, peace, and mutual respect. After a lifetime of being the woman behind the songs, Pattie Boyd had finally begun to write her own story. At 80, Pattie Boyd speaks with a clarity that can only come from surviving decades of passion, pain, and disillusionment. The glamour of being a rock muse has long since faded, replaced by the sobering truth of what those years truly cost her. She has admitted that her life with Eric Clapton was not the romantic dream the public imagined. It was a vicious cycle of addiction, betrayal, and emotional neglect. The man who once declared he would sacrifice everything for her love ended up breaking her trust in the most intimate ways. Boyd has not shied away from calling out the hypocrisy she endured. While she struggled with the heartbreak of failed IVF treatments and the crushing pressure of infertility, Clapton was fathering children with other women. She has described the discovery of his infidelities as a stab in the heart, a betrayal that felt all the more cruel because it mocked her deepest wounds. Yet, her revelations are not meant to inspire pity. They are acts of reclamation. Boyd has chosen to tell her story on her own terms, refusing to be remembered only as a face in someone else's song. Through her memoir, exhibitions, and candid interviews, she has confronted the myths that once painted her life as a fairy tale. She has reminded the world that behind Layla and Wonderful Tonight was a woman enduring heartbreak, humiliation, and loneliness. And yet there is also resilience in her legacy. Despite the betrayals and disappointments, Boyd has rebuilt her life. She has found stability with her third husband, Rod Weston, and continues to be celebrated for her photography and cultural influence. At 80, she stands not as a muse defined by others, but as a survivor who has finally revealed the truth, unfiltered, painful, and necessary. What are your thoughts on Pattie Boyd's shocking revelations about her marriage to Eric Clapton? Do you think she was unfairly treated, or simply caught in the storm of fame and ego? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss our next story.